Well then, so I'm going to go through another dream. So this one is a continuation of the dream that I've just filmed, because it's got some really, really similar elements to it. So I wanted to put them sort of side by side so you could see how incredibly close they are. They are actually, they do have quite a bit of distance between them, as far as, I think it's about 4 months in between. And it very much feels like a continuation, or it's almost like the first dream had a bit of information, gives me an idea as to what it's talking about, and now on to the second dream, it opens it up a bit more, but it does make me think of the same sort of elements still. So anyway, I'll get into this one. So what I want to quickly just go through with you is really just a, what's the word? To help you visualize this situation. I think, actually, no, I'll just go straight into it, because actually, to be honest, with my description, it does go straight into it anyway. So what I would say about this one is I did record this roughly about 2 hours after having the dream. Now that's very unusual for me. Very, very unusual, in fact, because normally it'll be, I wake up from the dream, literally eyes open, and then it'll be, right, phone out, and I'll start typing. Okay, doesn't matter what time it is, whatever time it is, I'll start writing. And again, I've mentioned in previous videos, sometimes because I sit bolt upright, sometimes it disturbs my wife, and she'll be like, "What are you doing? It's 1 o'clock in the morning, or it's 3 o'clock in the morning. What are you doing?" And it's just writing this dream down. Okay, and then sometimes it takes me about an hour sometimes to write some of these dreams down that are really, really thorough. Hour and a half sometimes I've had to write a dream down, because it's just so much detail. And then try and get back to sleep. And sometimes I do that. I have a crazy dream, and then I have another one. I'm like, wow, okay, straight into another one. So I do actually find that quite often. You may have heard me say, "Oh, this is just dream 1 of 4," and they've all got meaning. I mean, you can see all the meaning in them, and it's just like I have a night of dreams that are dedicated to me to, record them and then put them into videos. Anyway, moving on. Let's get actually into the dream. But as I said, because it was so vivid, 2 hours later, I knew this is one I needed to record this. So there might be small elements maybe that I missed out because I lost in memory, but some of those bits I feel kind of came back a bit after the event, because it was so vivid. I mean, I can still see it in my mind now, if that makes sense, even though this was 2 months ago, almost to the day, about 2 months ago, and I still remember it very, 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 very vividly. Anyway, so this is, as I said, very similar to the previous dream. So I remember being on the outskirts of a jungle. So if you imagine, I'm basically about 2 to 3 meters inside a tree line that's thick jungle, very, very thick jungle, and it's clearly a man-made clearing I've got in front of me, because it's just a complete straight line, as far as you can see. If you were to sort of poke your head out, let's say, and have a little look down, which I do a little bit to a certain extent, is I can see it's a big, long tree line. Now that's the same as the previous dream, but instead of that, I was looking through a hedge, and I was looking down, and I actually jumped through, and had a look, and I saw this tank sort of thing that was driving down in a big, long, straight line. So this is incredibly similar. So this is not a bush line, this is a tree line. Okay, but it would have had bushy, like, sort of bits and pieces and stuff in between. Okay, so it's very, very thick, but I was able to see out and onto this grassland that's in front of me. And again, I'll go into some of these other elements, of course. But what happened was, we'd mistakenly, I would have said, set ourselves up in this location, and we've set ourselves up as there's multiple people with me. Okay, multiple people with me. We're all traveling together. I say it's a group, but it's a small group. Let's say, I don't know, 5 people, 5 to 10 people, let's say, around about that kind of number. Not a massive group, but we've been traveling through the jungle. We've now got to this threshold, let's say, of where we're just about now to go to open grassland. Okay, and we've got there and felt, no, this isn't the right time to cross. Let's just wait here for a bit. Let's just get ourselves, it's kind of like, get yourself settled before you move on to that next stage, that next step, let's say, of the journey. Okay, so that's what's happening. So we've come to this little spot where we decided we're going to have a rest, put our bags down, sit down, lie down, whatever. just to chill for a little bit. What we didn't realize initially when we've picked this point is that there's I actually noticed a sign which is a bit bizarre. In this jungle there was just this kind of like pole and a sign or something like that, or it was nailed to a tree. I can't really remember, but it said about how there was a pride of lions in the area, and just to be wary, of there's a pride of lions around here. It's almost like it was no, I wouldn't want to say like a tourist thing, but I think it would be more like, there's a pride of lions that this is their territory, basically, I would have said, and to be very, very wary of it. It was a warning, of course. Yeah. So, yeah. So I'm staring forward, as I mentioned already. So I'm within this tree line, and I'm looking out, and let's just say, yeah, I'll say it this way. So I'm looking out, I see this grassland, I can see it. I'm in a thick jungle, but I can see through fine. Okay. I look to my right, actually, and outside of our group, so our group is quite close altogether, I would have said about somewhere between 5 to 8 meters away in a straight line, just along this tree line. I'm looking across, and I see this rustling, in this kind of, I would describe this is how, yeah, this is my second time shooting this, actually, so I'm trying to refine it a bit better. So the leaves were very much like, if you imagine like the suit cards that say, on a cards you've got spades, and it's that kind of, sort of almost like a heart with a stalky bit to it, like that. It was like a little bit like a spade, as far as the shape of these leaves, but they're really, really big ones, that are kind of, I can't even show you on screen, can I? Really big, really, really big ones that you see that kind of collect water, and you see people in jungle things where they use it, to collect water and it pour down. It was those kind of massive jungle leaves, and there's all this rustling going on, and I'm just very aware that, okay, we're not alone. We're not alone in this jungle, because all of our guys are collected together. Okay. Then, yeah, okay, out of this tree line, then that's when I'm looking forward. And I'm looking forward, as I said, upon this grassland, and I can see a lion just comes into view through where I can sort of see, just comes into view, and I'm seeing it through this jungle line until it gets quite close to me. When it's closer, I can see a bit more directly, rather than through, like, diagonally, I suppose, through a lot more trees and stuff like that, where it's very, very obscured. But as it comes closer and closer, and I'm seeing it a bit more front on, then I can see it a lot clearer, and I can see that it's a female lion. Okay, and it's patrolling up and down this tree line, which is exactly the same as the previous dream, where it was a tank patrolling up and down a straight line, and this is exactly the same. Now, what is different, I would have said, with this one versus the other one, is that I don't actually jump out of that safety, let's say, of the jungle. I'm staying in the jungle here. There's never a point where I jump out. I do get an idea of this being a long line, though, of jungle, and I'm not sure whether that's just a knowing, or I pushed forward a bit closer rather than being 2 to 3 meters in. Maybe when that line went a bit further down, again, a bit like the first stream when the tank moved on, then I moved forward and I had a little bit of a peer around, and so I could see a bit more. I think it might have been that, because I got very much got an impression of a straight, completely straight line, and I'm almost certain, and I didn't mention this on the previous one actually, that I got not an aerial view, I want to say, almost like how high was I seeing it from? 30, 40, 50 feet, let's say. I'm sure I saw an aerial view almost of this tree line, this grass, and this building that's there. So there is a destination that we're going to. Again, I wrote that later, that there was a building there. I'm very sure that there was a building there, something that we were aiming for, but we weren't going to do it now, because that's what we were very aware of, was this grassland that was just too open. If we wandered out, then somebody could somebody could get us, whatever that is, whether that's wildlife or whether that's people shooting at us or whatever it is. I was very aware that I don't know whether we were being chased or something, but all of us had decided that where we were going, we were going to stay there for safety, and then we were going to move on. Okay, so it's like we were going somewhere. And no, I won't mention it. Which reminds me of another video of mine. But not almost every video, that might be a bit extreme, but this season I've been mentioning it so frequently. It's called Future Exodus. That's where we're leaving a place and we're going as a group, and there's a few little elements, I would have said, from what I'm saying, that is in that Future Exodus. If all the plugging that I've been given to that video has not worked so far, check out Future Exodus. It's a really fascinating dream. It's in season 1. It's got some brilliant messages in that. Okay, so I'm looking out. As I said, I see this. I know clearly that that pride of lions is literally meters away, because that's what all that rustling is. Now, I did get a feel that this patrolling line could have, and I'm only just going to say it could have been the case because I didn't write it down as an initial thought, more of an afterthought. But it was a female lion, and I don't know whether it had some young or it was just others within the pride, let's say. But it was providing a protecting role. It was patrolling up and down, as I said, this line. But as I said, I'm just looking out, and it can't see me, despite it being very close, actually, because it does come quite close to us as it's going in front. But it never sees me, and I kind of likened it a little bit to, or I was thinking of it literally just as I was talking now, a little bit like where, let's say it's nighttime, and you've got the light on in the room that you're in. You can't really, if it's a bright light, you can't really see outside very easily, but the outside can sort of see you incredibly easily because it's all lit up. It was sort of like that in that role sort of flip, in that I could see them very, very easily because it was just completely clear, obviously, whereas they couldn't really see me at all. It's just that sort of similar sort of thing. Despite actually being me pretty close, they still couldn't see me because of just the sheer amount of again, bushes and leaves and trees and stuff that I was in amongst. Right. Okay. So yeah. So as I said, we're taking rest in this area, and clearly we know that we've got this prowling lion that's right by us, which we've obviously been incredibly cautious about. And yeah, there was no real context as to what this was all about, if I'm honest. So as I said, I'm not sure what it was all about. Why were we these people that were wandering around, and where were we going and stuff like that? None of that was actually really explained. But what happened anyway was we got spotted. So we got spotted at some point, and I don't think it was actually by the lion that was patrolling. It was some that were actually within the jungle area, and we realised that we were pretty much surrounded, by all these different animals. Now I wrote down here, I saw them. So if you imagine, I just mentioned that to my right. So let's say for us here, the clearing's in front of me, and to my right, I've got all the jungle bits, and then it sweeps obviously all the way around me because it's jungle everywhere, and all behind me. But I saw some animals coming in from different directions. I didn't actually see anything come from my left, but they could have come from my left. I just didn't notice them. But we were clearly surrounded, and in front of us, obviously, we've got this open area, which makes us incredibly vulnerable, or we just deal with what's here right now. So what happens is they come in, and then they speak to us, and we speak to them, but it's all telepathically. We understand each other. There's no language barrier, which obviously you would think that there would be between animals, but there is no language barrier. We understand each other, and what we're sort of saying to them is how. Where did I write it? I basically said, look, we're just passing through. We're not here to harm you at all. We're just passing through, and we're just looking for some temporary refuge at the moment. And they basically give us their blessing, let's say, to stay on the basis that it is temporary. Well, not that I necessarily got that impression, but we've said we're just passing through. Okay, it's a short-term thing. You know, we're going to be gone soon. And one of the animals that came through, I mentioned here, and this was an afterthought because this was admittedly like a couple of weeks, because I'm writing this, I think I wrote around about the 16th. So I'm writing it about 10 days later from my phone and putting it then into my dream journal for me to use, obviously, for filming. Because I was I was really, really close there to the end of the time frame that I'd recorded of dreams before I was going to start filming. You know, I hadn't yet started filming, but I was pretty much there, because there's only a couple more dreams, and that's the end of this particular book. It's as far as I've got, actually, with my book. But anyway, I do mention that one of these animals that came in, I felt like was a bit like the monkey / ape, let's say, because again, I went through a bit of a weird conversation there about what an ape is and what a monkey is. But you know, the one that's in the Lion King, that's got it's got like blue bits on its nose, hasn't it? I said I think it's a mandrill. I don't know 100%, but I don't, because it's very, very different to the monkey, really. So disregard that. Here we go again. You know, I'm starting to go into all the different types of breed of monkey that it was, but it looked very similar to that, but it was kind of like a bit more gangly, you know, the way it moved, sort of thinner and stuff like that. And it kind of walked in and was talking to us. We had lions that came in, and I can't remember if there's any other types of animals that came in as well. But it was interesting, this kind of connection I had with Lion King, and obviously that monkey's the one that holds up the little baby cub, doesn't it? Cub lion. And that's what I was thinking of when I said I had a feeling that maybe the female was maybe looking after maybe a cub, potentially, that's in that kind of rustling area. I'm not 100% sure, actually. And as I said, I wrote that, you know, a week and a half later, as to, I'm sure that there was like this monkey thing that came in, but I'm not 100% sure. But I was just very aware that it was very dangerous for us to cross this from this tree line into this grassland, also by day, because we'd be very open. So I wasn't sure whether we were resting there until the sun went down and then we were going to cross. It wasn't 100% known. And again, as I mentioned, I didn't write it down that there was a building, but I'm pretty sure there was. Just like I don't remember specifically writing down that I saw this aerial sort of view, but I'm pretty sure I did at one point, which is where I saw the length of everything and stuff like that. And it's almost like that I was seeing through like almost like a security camera that was on this building, maybe. Again, I'm trying to piece this all together. I think that's sort of what happened. So what was the transparency? Well, there's no transparency statement for me to write, really, other than to say there's nothing that affected this dream at all. Nothing with lions, nothing with monkeys, nothing to do with crossing various lines and stuff like that. Nothing at all like that. So nothing that could affect this dream at all. Very, very strange, very random dream. So my thoughts were, well, it was obviously an incredibly similar dream to the other dream that I had, which was back in September, so 4 months prior, which, as I said, I've written here, hadn't yet filmed. I've literally just filmed it. But I've already mentioned some of these similar elements. You know, obviously the farmland that had the bush line and the roaming tank, and I was sticking my head out and I actually jumped out on and then jumped back in, which was ridiculous, really, because obviously I could have got shot, you know, with this tank, you know, with a gunner who was there. Not that I saw a gunner, but, you know, I could have easily got shot. Whereas in this, I didn't really do that. So, and this is where I go into crossing thresholds. Okay, so as I said, I'm refilming this from previously doing it. I'm going to cover off threshold again, because I do think it is very, very important to describe what a threshold is. So threshold is basically moving from one area to another. So again, if we're looking at this side on, it's like I'm in the jungle, that's the end of the tree line, so that's the threshold, and I'm moving through to the grassland. Okay, so you're moving from one to another. Okay, a threshold. Threshold, obviously, how we use in context is you'd have your threshold, wouldn't you, between rooms. Let's say, so the door closes, and on the floor, quite often you'll have what's called a threshold, which just indicates that difference between rooms. As an example, it could be you move from carpet to wooden flooring, and then you'll have some sort of a threshold, you know, like something that goes between it that kind of binds those two together. Yeah, that makes sense. What I'm going to go back to, though, is of the times when this was all written, as far as the Passover and these other threshold things, what that actually was. So I'm going to go into some detail. This is to do with a book, which I'm going to quickly show you. This one, which is by Zev Porat, which is called Blood Alliance. It's a very good book. It's written by a messianic rabbi. So somebody who obviously teaches about the Bible, but he's messianic, meaning that he believes in Messiah, that Messiah has come, Jesus has come. Yeah, so he's a believer. But he's got some fantastic views on things, because he's viewing it as a Jew and a lot of their tradition and stuff like that. So I love things that have Jewish tradition in them, because it brings everything into such sharper focus as to what you're seeing. In a lot of the stuff that you read it and you think, well, what does that mean? It obviously made a lot of sense to the original readers, but to us, we're like, well, what does that mean? Well, this helps you with that sort of stuff. And there's a lot of things that you probably read and you just sort of skim past and just like, oh, okay, yeah, it is what it is. You just read it and you move on. But I would highly recommend getting a study Bible for sure, if you don't have one already, because that will fill those gaps of knowledge for sure. So stuff that you're reading that you think, oh, it's just about this. No, it's way deeper than that. It's way deeper than that. And the study Bible will open that up for you, hopefully. The one I recommend, not that I'm sponsored by this, I'm nowhere near big enough to be sponsored by anybody, is actually one that I'll quickly open it just so you can see it. I've mentioned it on other videos as well. This one, which is a cultural Bible, it's by Zondervan, who do quite a few different bits and pieces, actually. They do an architectural Bible as well, which is quite handy because it shows you pictures of architectural finds that back up the Bible and how incredibly, obviously perfectly accurate it all is, and how there's artifacts and stuff like that being found. You get that actually in this cultural one. You get loads of stuff. You get stuff of like pictures of the temple, layouts of things, and archaeological things. So they'll show pictures of coins and pottery, and go into loads of detail around certain cultural aspects. It's a really fascinating book, as far as how it opens all that sort of stuff up. So cultural Bible, I think it's really worth having. More so, I would say, than an architectural one. I wanted to get an architectural one, but I thought, you know what, there's a lot of that already in here, in this Bible, so not really any point. I think they might do an architectural one, but there was one that I was looking at. It was just so expensive. I just thought, how much extra am I going to get out of it, really? Because there's a lot of that here. But I would recommend that. I've bought that one. I bought this Bible actually for a couple of people. I've given as gifts because I think it's brilliant. I do really think it's brilliant. So yeah, sorry, what we were talking about. Remind me. Yeah. So we're talking about the Blood Alliance. We were talking about the what's it called? The Passover. We were talking about the Passover, and that what you saw there, hopefully, on that flash up there was the doorway, and it shows the blood across the doorway. I'm going to quickly give you a bit of information on that. So if you see that, or if you generally sort of see that kind of imagery, you would have seen painted normally at the top left and right, and across the top is where you'd have the blood painted for the Passover, and it would naturally drip because of the overhead. It would just naturally drip down and hit the floor. So if you were to draw a line, you would actually have a cross. So it was another image of the cross before, obviously, that happening. Quite obviously, really. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's one of those things where you see it and you think, wow, if somebody hadn't pointed it out to me, I probably would have missed it. But then when you see it, it's quite obviously a cross. And a cross with blood, of course, and it's obviously it's talking about Jesus, because Jesus is the Passover lamb. Of course, he's called the Lamb of God. The sacrifice, because obviously they used to sacrifice lambs, and many other animals, of course. But what I wanted to cover off with you was the whole sacrificial aspect. So I've done this in a previous video. I can't remember which one it was. And so I'm just going to do it again. So Passover. Well, no, sorry. I'm going to go through blood covenants. That's what I'm going to cover off. Now, this is all in that book I just showed you, the Blood Alliance one. It goes through loads of detail. Really, really fascinating. I would recommend that book. It does have some controversial stuff around certain things it talks about. And it does actually go against one of the bits that he goes into does actually go against one of my dreams, but I'm still going to recommend it to you. So I think it's worth reading. So yeah, what I was going to cover up was that blood agreement. So, okay, to give you an example, so let's say that you were making an agreement, you're making a deal, a long-term arrangement, a covenant with somebody. Okay, I'm not going to use the obvious ones of things like marriages and stuff like that because it works differently, but there is very much, I'm not going to, or shall I? Very, very quickly. Very, very quickly. I'm going to have to do it very quickly. Right, the wedding ceremony. Okay, a modern wedding ceremony. What do you see? You see family on the left, family on the right. The ushers send you in. They say, "Oh, which side of the family you on?" "Oh, I'm the bride." "Okay, you're on the left-hand side." "Are you family? You're groom." "Okay, you're on the right-hand side." You walk down the center, and then at the beginning, you come together, don't you, in an agreement, which is the marriage ceremony. I won't go through too much more of that. Only to say that is very much patterned on the Bible. So there is an agreement that God makes with Abraham when he's talking about. I'm pretty sure it's when he's talking about his descendants and stuff like that. Is Abraham sort of says, let's make this a proper agreement. You know, you've told me all these promises, but let's make this official, kind of thing. You see what I mean? And so he makes God says, yeah, that's fine. Okay, you know, to that extent, you know, that we'll do an agreement. That's fine. And he talks about cutting these animals in half and placing them to the side, and then God passes through the middle. Now that's what's called a unilateral agreement, meaning that everything is binding on God. So God is saying, I'm gonna make this agreement with you. But what you'll find with that is that Abraham doesn't pass through that agreement with God. It's just God. So God's saying, I'm making this promise essentially to you, Abraham, and that's it. Because what happens is he puts Abraham in a sleep. So Abraham doesn't walk through this, but that's an agreement. And that's also, again, the same thing. If you imagine the bride and the groom, you've got the witnesses. You've got two sets of witnesses there, which he talks about witnesses, obviously, in the Bible all the time, that you have to have witnesses. Where you've got in a modern marriage where you've got the witnesses from both sides of the family, haven't you? That are witnessing this agreement being made in front of God. Okay. And then you make your solemn vows, which I've mentioned before, which I've had in a dream. It was actually Holy Spirit spoke to me something. It was really poetic. Really poetic. That I'll find that video for you and put that in. That is really fascinating, and that talks about the wedding agreement and binding together and stuff like that. I'll find that one for you and I'll put that one in. See, this again, this video has gone and taken a different turn completely. So that's what that goes through. So that's kind of, as I said, that's weddings. Okay, that's weddings. I'm going to go through business deals, but it's done. You know, there's similar aspects. So business deals, let's say, would be like in the Middle East. Let's say you would have an agreement with somebody. The example I used on the first time I shot this was like a businessman where they're going into a business and I've got a shop, I'm going to be buying olives off you, the farmer. Let's make an agreement. Let's set up a business relationship between you and me that's binding. You know, we're gonna do this deal together, or we're gonna go into business together. You know, you're gonna come in as a partner, and we're gonna have this business together. Whatever it may be, two parties coming together, making an agreement. You can use whatever example you want. What would happen is they would come to an agreement, you know, to say more or less, so do you want to do this? Yeah, sure, okay. And like Abraham, I mentioned there, is, well, let's make this official. Let's make this official, okay? So what they would do is they'd do that via blood. It would be a blood sacrifice that was done to bind to this agreement, okay? So what you would have is this threshold, which I keep talking about, and you would have what's called a groover. So it was like a groove in this threshold that would be for the Passover, really. So what you would use it for is you would hold between your legs, you would hold your lamb, hold its head, obviously, and cut its throat. Obviously, the blood's going to hit the ground and go all over your threshold. But it's also, if you're holding while it's draining, the what's it called, the lamb over, let's say, or whatever you're sacrificing. I'm using the example of a lamb here, obviously, because of the Passover symbology. And then all that blood will go into this groove. So it's almost like guttering. If you imagine like guttering on the floor, on the ground, and it will go into something that collects that blood. Okay, that will be sort of, let's say, slightly lower down, and that's just going to trickle into this thing that you would use. And then for the Passover specifically, then you would get your hyssop, which is just like a branch sort of thing with stuff on it, dip it in, and then you'd use it like a paintbrush to go around your doorway. Okay, in this example, it would be used slightly different in this business deal one. So you wouldn't have the hyssop thing, that's a Passover thing. But this would be, just for a second, it just flashed into my mind. Why hyssop? Okay, when Jesus is on the cross, there is is it the Roman soldier that puts the sponge on hyssop and then puts it up really high, doesn't he, to give to Jesus? That's, again, it's like another picture of the Passover, yet again, of using hyssop. That's why it's specifically it's in there, to connect you to Passover. And obviously, where you're using hyssop to get up high, to do the top of your door, it's the same thing. Okay, it's all so symbolic. Where was I going? Yeah, so the blood sacrifice has happened. Blood's all on the floor. Okay, it's all over the ground in front of you. Then you would say to the person that you're making this agreement with, right? So are we in agreement? And you would be in your house. You're the one who's created the sacrifice. Yeah, who's caused this to happen. And then you've got the other party who's got to agree to this sacrifice. So and this blood covenant that's been made, because it becomes this binding agreement. So if they specifically step over the blood, so let's say that's the blood there, and you've got the house there and the outside. If they step over the blood, which they would do very carefully as to not touch the blood, if they came into the house, it's an agreement. They've agreed to it. If you stepped on the blood, then that's you declining the agreement, and that would be seen as a massive insult. If we've got to this point, and now you're stepping on the blood, that's a massive, a massive negative, let's say. Massive negative. And this is referred to in the Bible, actually. I'm not sure where it is. I will find it for you. But it does talk about stepping on the blood, and stepping on the blood and it's talking about Jesus, but it's stepping on the blood of the covenant or something like that. It's talking about, as I said, I'll find the scripture. And what it's saying is that you're not agreeing to the covenant with Jesus. You're stepping on the blood. So you're declining that covenant relationship with Jesus. And it's a disgraceful sort of act, isn't it, to step on it in the way I've just described it. You've got as far as this, and then you in that business relationship sort of scenario, and then you step on the blood. You could back out at any point, but you decided to disgrace me by actually stepping on that blood. We've just made a sacrifice. How unnecessary was that, if you were already a no anyway? So that's going into the Passover in a lot of detail there, which I really felt a conviction of needing to go through that. On the second time round, I really felt like I couldn't exclude that. Okay, so I know it's only somewhat relevant to what we're talking about here in passing through a threshold, but I think it's very relevant, really, of passing through a threshold. I mean, in the symbology of these two dreams, am I passing through a threshold? Is it representing me moving from death, so without Christ, to life with Christ? I don't know that it is actually specifically talking about that, but we've definitely got it in there. Okay, could this be talking about something completely different, though? Could it be? So I'm going to throw out an alternative here. Is it talking about a temporary peace? Okay, because I'm talking here about having this peace with these animals, and but it is on the basis of it is quite short term, because we're going to be moving on, so it's a temporary peace. Okay, that's what it feels like to me. Now, I've had a temporary peace in another video, which I mentioned actually on the previous one, which is called Gathering Storm, which I think links into Ezekiel 38 personally. It's in season 1. So I'm actually citing all the same sort of ones. I cited obviously the angels among us. I think did I mention that already? But there's another one that I've got called Angels Among Us, where I'm looking at an angel which is all lit up behind a bush, and I can see it. It can't see me. Okay, again, similar to all of these, where I can see the tank can't see me. I can see the lion, but the lion can't see me. Okay, I explain my thoughts on that kind of aspect actually in the first dream before this one, but this one I want to take us in a different direction. Okay, I'm not saying that they're necessarily. It's not, the message from the first one isn't you can't be transmitted across to this one, but I would have said that this maybe talks about something different, which is a temporary piece. So I want to go through a few different scriptures. There was a whole different route I wanted, that I was considering going through, but I'm not going to. Again, I'm not going to. I'm going to have a read through of it actually after this, and then see whether I would do it as like an extra part two to it. But for now, I'm gonna move past that. Okay. So yeah, I'm going to read that separately. So what I'm going to go through is just going to be a few different scriptures here. So I'm going to go through some Old Testament first, only a little bit. I'm going to go through Daniel, and I'm going to go through Daniel 9, 24 to 27. 24 to 27. Okay, and I'll try and explain it as to what I think this is sort of talking about. But this is talking about a moment really in the temple. Yeah, I'm still going to go through it. I don't know whether this quite matches, to be honest. So if not, I've pointed you to some prophecy and some scripture, and maybe it's not relevant actually for this dream. I'm not 100% sure. But if we go Daniel 9 verses 24 to 27, so 77s is what it says, inverted commas sort of thing. 77s are decreed for your people and your holy city to finish transgression, to put an end to sin, to atone for wickedness, to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up prophecy and vision, and to anoint the most holy place. So this is talking about salvation, clearly. Bringing an end to transgression, so putting an end to sin, atonement for wickedness, and everlasting righteousness. Okay, is what it's talking about there. So I'm going to carry on. I just wanted to, because there's a lot here. 77s, I'm going to go through that in a moment. Okay, so that's just verses 24, 25. No one understand this. From the time the word goes out to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the anointed one, the ruler, comes, there will be seven sevens. There will be 7 sevens and 62 sevens. So 77s. There'll be 7 sevens and 60. Yeah, sorry, this is for something else. So I'll read that again. No one understand this. From the time the word goes out to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the anointed one, the ruler, comes, there will be 7 sevens and 62 sevens. It will be rebuilt with streets and a trench, but in times of trouble. After the 62 sevens, the anointed one will be put to death, and will have nothing. The people of the ruler who will come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end will come like a flood. War will continue until the end, and desolations have been decreed. He will confirm a covenant with many for 1 7. In the middle of the 7, he will put an end to sacrifice and offering, and at the temple, he will set up an abomination that causes desolation until the end that is decreed is poured out on him. Okay, there's quite a lot of stuff in there. So it's talking about a time frame. That time frame you can actually measure, because it's talking about here from a decree. After, where does it say? It says something about a decree that's given, then the anointed one comes, and then you've got war and stuff like that. Loads of stuff that gets destroyed, etc. And then it's talking then future, I would suggest, whereas then talking about that there'll be a covenant with many for 1 7, which is when it says 7, it means like 7 years. And in the middle of that 7, There'll be put an end to sacrifice and offerings, and the temple will be, and at the temple will be set up an abomination that causes desolation until the end is decreed, is poured out on him. So a lot of people will say that that's talking about the Antichrist that comes, and it's talking about a 7-year tribulation, which is talked about in Revelation, where it talks about 7 years of, again, this is somewhat contested. There'll be 7 years in which there's judgment coming upon the earth, halfway through, where it talks about here, halfway through, there'll be this desolation that causes this desecration that happens to the temple, and then that's when it really kicks off in the last 3.5 years. Okay, so again, somewhat contested, I would have said, in Revelation, by people's understandings of these and stuff like that. But the anointed one is talking about Jesus. That's quite clear, and it talks about obviously him bringing an end to death and all of that kind of stuff, because obviously his sacrifice does that. Yeah. But it talks about a war coming, and the temple being destroyed and stuff like that. Well, that did happen. That was there was the judgment obviously that came just after Jesus's death, roughly 40 years, very roughly 70 AD. The temple was destroyed and Jerusalem was just completely flattened, pretty much. It did happen in other times as well. So the desecration aspect has happened in the past. So that would be from Antiochus Epiphanes in the 2nd century BC. And obviously 70 AD is when you get the actual destruction of the temple and stuff like that. Generally, it's seen as a fulfillment to a certain extent, but also that this is something that happens again in the future, because there's many events that happen once as a shadow of something greater, of more fulfillment in the future. So a very quick and obvious example of that is Abraham and Isaac going up the mountain where Isaac's going to be sacrificed. Not that he doesn't know that in that scenario, but he does find out towards the end. He realizes, clearly he does, because he is not a child. You can work out that his rough age is probably in his 20s, 30s, something like that. Certainly at the age where he can overpower his father, but he is obedient to his father. He's the one carrying the wood. It's clearly that he is Jesus. That says a foreshadowing of Jesus. You get up to the top, and Abraham is talking about how God's going to provide the lamb. Well, he does. Jesus is called the Lamb of God. And then there is a ram with its head stuck in a thicket, which is like a thorny kind of bush, and that is I think most people would say is the crown of thorns, because its head is stuck in the thorny bush. This ram, so a male lamb, representing Jesus, and that God provides the lamb, because this ram just appears from nowhere, kind of in the story, it just appears from nowhere. Oh, look, there's the sacrifice, and that's Jesus, obviously. So we see a lot of foreshadowing and stuff of things that will happen in the future. So the Antiochus Epiphanes, yeah, sure, that could certainly be fulfillment, but at the same time, it happens again. You get, as I said, you get a lot of this kind of stuff happen. Okay, the peace and safety aspect. Okay, and I'm going to go through a couple of bits here. So we've done just obviously Old Testament there. I'm going to quickly go through Matthew. So I'm going to go Matthew 24, verses 15 to 21. So this is Jesus speaking here. He's talking about the destruction of the temple and signs of the end times, that kind of stuff. So Matthew 15 then, so Matthew 24 verses 15. So when you see in the holy place, so the temple, the abomination that causes desolation spoken of through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. Then that those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one on the housetop go down to take anything out of the house. Let no one go in the field or go back to get their cloak. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that your flight will not take place in the winter or at the Sabbath, for there will be great distress, unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again. Okay, so that's the bit I wanted to cover off with you. So again, there are different interpretations of that. I heard one literally yesterday, And I've heard before that when it's talking about the holy place, that it doesn't necessarily mean a physical location. Maybe it means the holy place is us, believers. We are the temple. So there is thoughts on that it does talk about in that Blood Alliance book. And obviously I've had a dream where I actually saw something in a temple. Okay, but that's the one that's called Birth of the Antichrist. So I'd highly recommend you watch that one. It's very, very incredibly interesting, incredibly visual one. I've somewhat ruined it by saying, kind of what happens to a certain extent, but it's still difficult. Again, it's one of those Birth of the Antichrist. What I could have called it the temple, I suppose, but I had another one that was called more or less the temple, so I thought I'll call it that. Somewhat gives stuff away. Anyway, let's do this next one. So, sorry, what was that? That was Matthew. Oh, yeah, I've done Matthew, haven't I? Matthew 25 done. Yeah, I just wanted to cover off what was this First Thessalonians 5 verses 1 to 3. Again, is it 3? 1 to 3? Yeah. So now, brothers and sisters, so about times and dates, we do not write to you, for you know very well that the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night. While people are saying peace and safety, destruction will come on them suddenly as labor pains on a pregnant woman, and they will not escape. Okay, so that's again talking about talking about peace and safety. That is said by the UN and people all the time, specifically peace and safety, peace and security. You hear it all the time. It's very much, something that you hear all over the place, world peace and stuff like that. We're hearing this all the time. And it just won't be achieved. I don't think it will be achieved. But I think that it could well be talking about this in this dream, in that it's talking about, obviously, this false peace. I feel like there would be in that I've got this peace with these animals, that are the lions and all these different ones. But it was a temporary peace. It's obviously just a little temporary peace that we've got. And there's a lot of scripture that talks about a potential temporary peace that Israel feels safe, and then this sudden destruction that comes upon them, which was one bit there that I just mentioned to you. There was another bit that I wanted to just add in that I didn't mention on the last time I filmed this, which was actually to do with so being surrounded. That was it. That was one of the things I was thinking of. I kind of mentioned that, if you heard me. I was surrounded by animals, okay? Because I was surrounded by animals, or we were, let's say, in this scenario. So maybe we represented Israel, again, as a collective of people, and we're fleeing. So again, this is where this connects into what's it called? Future Exodus, which again, I've already mentioned it. I think it's definitely worth watching, to be honest. I think it's a really, really good, a really interesting dream, really good visuals, Holy Spirit involved in providing a message at the end and stuff. It's really, really interesting, binds it all together. And it's talking about the same sort of nations I'm going to mention here because of the flag colours are green, white and black, I think. There might have been red in there, but it's the typical flag colours, obviously, that you see there. Interestingly, that I heard somebody mention, isn't interesting that the flag colours of the nations around Israel are actually exactly the same colours of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, which are white for peace, black for war. Red for war, black for kind of hyperinflation and problems, poverty, famine, and the pale horse, which is often depicted as green for people looking sickly. When people feel sick, they say, "Oh, you look green." But it's the 4 colours of those flags. That you have loads of nations around Israel, so they're surrounded by nations that pretty much hate them at the moment. That may change to a certain extent, but this surrounded element of animals. Okay, now I don't want you to I don't want you to think that I'm calling all these people animals, but what I wanted to mention was that there's some extra biblical books that are connected to the Bible in that they mentioned, and I mentioned this before, like Gad the Seer, the Book of Jubilees, the Book of Enoch. You've got a Book of Jasher, And there's quite a few different ones, and some of them are prophetic, and one of them does actually name various different animals, and it gives you a key almost as to, oh, the dog means this, the raven means this, the eagle means this, this is me just throwing out names, the monkey means this, all these different things, and that they represent nations. So so you can identify them in this dreamlike thing that's being described in there. So after filming the last one, as I said, that I decided to stop and then refilm, because I got to the end and I just didn't feel quite right about it. I didn't mention that, and I realized straight afterwards animals, and how they are depicted in extra biblical, non-canonical. So you won't find it here in the Bible. You will hear people referred to as dogs, but yeah, the Samaritan woman is referred to. The Samaritan woman as dogs is mentioned there, but again, I won't go into that. I will cite that scripture. I've just written it down. Anytime you see me kind of look across like that, quite often I'm writing something down to put in a description. Even if I just touch on it like that, I'll generally put it in there so you can have a little look at it. But it did make me think of that. Maybe these different individuals that say are representing different nations, and that we're surrounded, and that we think we've got a temporary peace, and that if this dream was to move on, maybe this dream would see that these animals would actually attack us, and that would be this attack, that we're surrounded by enemies, basically. Yeah, that's where I think there's quite a bit of a message going on there, potentially around it, Psalm 83, because that seems to be, and I mentioned in the last stream, it seems to be, from what I've read, a war that seems future, because of the nations that are involved have never all been involved before. But there is also stuff I mentioned there that quite often in certain styles of writing, sometimes it is a lot of the nations that completely surround you that you do actually name. And then you name the last one as being really the target of who you're really talking about, and is often the biggest and most powerful one. And they mention the Assyrians at the end of that list. So that if we were to look at modern day, who's the modern day Assyrians? Well, it's Assyrian sort of area, and I may be wrong here, but it was kind of encompassing, I think, like Iraq, Iran, that kind of area, and it kind of swept down. So it's quite a big empire. It was like the first one on the statue of Daniel, which the first one, sorry, no, it wasn't on the statue of Daniel. Sorry, correction. The first one was the head, which was to represent the Babylonians. Then you've got the Medo-Persians for the silver. Then you've got the bronze, which is the Greeks. Then you've got the legs of iron, which is, the vast majority believe, is the Roman Empire. I don't know how you would ever exclude the Roman Empire. They were absolutely massive. And the empire that was around at the time of Jesus as well. And then it talks about the 10 toes, which are 10 kings yet to come. And I mentioned a dream I had about a guy with a sovereign rings on like that. And it was sovereign rings. And I was like, that's the 10 kings, isn't it? Because a sovereign ring represents, well, sovereignty, which means, leadership. Being the sovereign of a nation is a king. And a sovereign ring is what you would use, and you would, you put into wax, let's say, when you're sealing documents and stuff, it's that kind of thing. And this guy had all 10. So it's like he represented the 10 kings of this end empire that is yet to come, but is close. I would say is close. That's yeah, I think that's where I'll leave this one. So hopefully you found that this kind of combination of all this stuff, I felt like it really came together way better than the other one did. I was a bit jumping all over the place because these other scriptures that I was citing, just so you know, was going into Judah in a bit of detail, because Judah, you've got the Lion of Judah, and it talks about the cub, and it's all in his, when everyone's receiving their blessings and stuff like that. It does go into Judah and how he'll have the scepter. He's going to be a leader, he's going to be, basically he's going to be a king, his lineage will be kings. And obviously, Jesus comes from the line of Judah, which is why he holds that kind of kingship, which it lists his genealogy, obviously, in Matthew, and I'm trying to think the other one. Is it Mark or Luke? That's probably Luke, isn't it? I think it's Luke. Not that it matters. I mean, you'll find it. It's right at the beginning of two of the books it goes through, and one of them goes into more detail, which I think is Matthew, which makes sense. It's a lot more detail generally, but that's a Jewish audience, that that's aimed at with Matthew. Anyway, hopefully you found that all interesting, and I will put together, so look in the description. There's going to be a lot in the description, because I'm going to be citing all these different videos that I've done previously that will link into this. I'll put the titles of the books so you can find the books, and any kind of scriptures I've either cited, literally read out, or ones that I've mentioned in passing. I'll try and get those all in for you. Okay. Yeah, as I said, hopefully this is all interesting to you, and I will continue. I would say at this point, I was having a look through just to see, well, how much more have I got to really cover off. I haven't really got a huge amount of extra dreams now, so I think I'm up to around about 30-ish, 35 is it? 37, something like that I'm up to at the moment of videos. My first season was 90 videos, but do bear in mind that that was covering a period of 2.5 years, whereas this has just been covering the last 3 or 4 months, something like that. So it gives you an idea of the huge amount of dreams I've had already squeezed down in quite a short period of time. I've not really had that many dreams recently, to be honest, and this tends to happen, I find, when I'm finishing off. I sometimes get some trailing ones that I might have while I'm still filming or writing out, and I think, should I include those, or should I see this as the break point, at the point at which I stopped writing the journal, as that's where the season finishes, or should I incorporate these extra ones I've had since? So I'm going to see what ones I've got. So there might be some extra ones I add on, but not many. I mean, it's like in the last 3 weeks, I've probably only had about 3 that I would write down, whereas in other times I might have 3 in a week, So yeah, very, very different. As I said, yeah, I'm going to move on now. It's a very long video, so thank you for sticking to the end. If you took it in parts, obviously, do what you got to do. Do what you got to do. I do find, obviously, doing these all in one go is far, far better than doing anything in parts, because obviously unless I'm constantly going back and sort of signposting, oh, we talked about this, do you remember that? You just get lost in it. But hopefully there's a lot of scripture and stuff like that we went back to and throw on, that made this, again, have good scriptural backing as to what I think the meaning is on this one. Do watch the first one. There may be another one that follows on from it, possibly not. Again, I'm going to read through all this stuff to do with the line of Judah and stuff like that, and see whether it's relevant enough for me to actually put it on as an extra part. But at the moment, I think probably not, but I'll check it out. Okay, thanks for your attention.